Dala, 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 dala. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I thank you for those of you who are new. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Dala simply means welcome in my language. And I want to make sure that if you are new, that you do subscribe and click on the notification bell to make sure you are notified every time I post a video. So today I wanted to answer a question that is actually a foundational question about African culture and African spirituality, but also linked to any culture or traditions that you are studying or that you come from. So this big question has come up a lot, and it concerns tradition. What is tradition? Many people want to start their own tradition. I've even had a video on that. Like, yes, you are free to start your own tradition. You are free to do whatever you want or whatever you please. But always remember, it's not because you can that you must or that you should. That will be a topic of a different video. But essentially, tradition is basically telling you that those are rules, those are wisdom, those are tools, those are things that have been tested over time. That's what it means. So, and oftentimes tradition are centuries old. This is not something that somebody's experimenting right now with your life or with your particular case. Traditions comes out of experience. It comes out of many different people, many different times. It has been tested and it has passed through the test of time in order to be part of tradition. If something is not working, it's most likely not going to be part of a tradition. So this is also why that when you're looking at gender norms, when you're looking at gender roles and things of that nature, don't think that it was just one person that sat down and decided, hey, this sounds like it's going to be nice. Those are things that people have done over centuries, not decades, centuries, and saying that this was the way that was most suitable for the majority. Okay, for the majority. So it's not like it was suitable for everyone. Okay? No. Get rid of that idea. Sometimes you have to, it's just like medication. When you're tasting a medicine or a plant, you see how it's working. And if it's working for the majority, this is how it may become actually medicine. It may become like a pill. Okay? And even when you're working with herbs, sometimes your formula, the main formula that you have, the dosage that you have, may work on a lot of people and it may not on others. And that's why you have to adjust based on those other specific cases. This is to say that tradition has been tested. This is not something that you are playing around in your own laboratory trying to figure things out or trying to come up with some new things. Okay? Now, within tradition, people who are well versed about the tradition, who understand where the tradition comes from, who uses those traditional tools or who uses traditional principles, wisdom, are the ones who are innovating with it. Sometimes, yes, sometimes people who are new to the tradition can also contribute to it, but most of the time the innovation comes from people who are already within the tradition because they have the wealth of the knowledge they understand. And of course, the interaction between people who are well versed in the tradition, like the elders or the practitioners, and interaction with the youth and the newcomers into the tradition results also sometimes in innovation, results also sometimes in things needing to change, to be tweaked, etc., to be modified. So traditions are experience that made the test of time. So for those of you who are saying, well, I'm just going to start my own tradition, I don't like what's out there, I don't like what I'm seeing, well, yeah, you may be starting your own tradition, but it won't become a tradition until it also passes the test of time. So don't go around saying like you have a new tradition. It's not a tradition. What it is right now is probably the couple of things that you're trying to put together or piece together. But it's not going to stand on its own as a tradition until maybe your children or your disciples or the people who want to carry that on, take that on through generations. Understand that this trend about wanting it now, doing it on your own, it's not going to fit well with tradition. Tradition requires time. Tradition requires many people engaging with whatever teaching, whatever wisdom, whatever knowledge, whatever tools are within being developed. The tradition cannot be all around you and what you know and what you're offering. You see, it has to be experimented by other people. This is why when you come into a tradition, whether it is the Yoruba tradition, whether it is the Peul, the Bamileke, or the Maasai, so forth and so on, or any Native American tradition, this is not the particular group that you see here today in 2019 who's developed these things. Those were developed generation after generation. And this is why it's so hard to change, because in order for you to show that something must be changed, you have to show that it's not useful anymore. You have to show that it doesn't work anymore, so forth and so on. And not just to one particular small group of people, but to the majority. And that's important to understand when you are fighting against tradition, or when you are rebelling against tradition, or when you want to create your own. When you want to create your own, you have to understand that it's going to take years. It's going to take generations. It's not going to resolve or end up within your own lifetime. When you're talking and speaking about tradition, you're talking about centuries. You're talking even sometimes about people who tested this knowledge, this wisdom in different environments. If you take, for example, people who are nomad tribes who've been in the desert, who've been in the forest, who've been in the mountains, their knowledge is so much more fluid than a lot of other knowledges, than a lot of other type of tools. What they're using, that means they, within their own tribe, within their own tradition, they have knowledge about pregnancy within the desert. How would you do? What would you eat? Pregnancy if you're in the context of the rainforest. Pregnancy in the context of the mountains. So this is a wealth of knowledge that's not going to be the same as somebody who's just in the city trying to come up with something new. And it's not to shame. I think it's a good idea. It's a good thing that you want to innovate. But I do think that you have to be somewhat sensible in terms of what it takes to create a tradition. And a tradition cannot just be you. As great that it may sound, that if you're the only one that's doing it and the only one for whom it works for, that's not a tradition. Unless it's picked up by someone else and by someone else and then by someone else. And of course passes a test of time. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I do think it's important to recognize that tradition is not there to oppress anybody. Tradition has never oppressed anyone. Even in my own tradition, I've mentioned before that people were able to leave the village. You're not happy with the rules, you don't want to follow whatever is being done or however people are living, you can leave and make your own village where you make up your own rules. And even though today you won't have the space to kind of live and go make your own village, because space is becoming there's a little more competition in terms of space, you can still leave the town where you grew up if you're not happy with how people are living their lives. You can, or even sometimes not even leave the whole town. You can just leave that part of town. And that's why you have those subcultures with different cultures, different ways of being, etc., etc. So you have to be mindful when you are rebelling against something, to make sure, first of all, that you understand what it is that you're rebelling against, that you understand the foundation of it as well, and that you understand the leeway that in no shape or form is anyone holding a gun to your head telling you have to follow this or you have to follow that. The same way we can force you to believe in a specific religion, some people can force you to act a certain way by placing some specific restriction, just like laws, but they can force you to believe in those laws, if you see what I mean. That's something that's internal. But I wanted to stress that point in terms of when you're speaking about traditions, what tradition is. Tradition is not something that somebody's cooking up as they go, that's coming to them right now, and they're telling you to experiment with this with your life, being part of an experimentation. That is not a tradition. So any new trends are not traditions, okay? Trends are not traditions. Matter of fact, even when you look at the fashion world, things that are trendy, they're trendy for a little while and then they die off. And then maybe a few years or centuries or decades later, that old trend comes back up and then die back again. So in the terms of the fashion world, for those of you who are a little more fashion versed, you will look at classic pieces. Classic pieces are the things that actually pass the test of time. Your black dress will always be in fashion no matter what time it is. Okay, those are the things like when you can look at tradition. Tradition are the element of traditions are the things that, tomorrow if it's snowing, if it's raining, no matter what happened in the future, that particular tool is still going to be useful to you. And the great example that I've been talking about on my channel is the principle of Ma'at, using Ma'at and those principles. So no matter what modern life you are living, what's if you're living in a city, in the rural area, or wherever you are, you can use those principles because they are time tested. Okay, those are not principles that I'm making up in my room. Those are not things that are just poured out of the ground. Those are not even things that even started with the Egyptian. They are universal principles. They even date way back before the Egyptians. Okay, I'm using Ma'at because as a visual, as the way the symbolism behind it is much more easier to grasp for most people, especially those who are interested in Kemetic systems. But those are not principles that are particular to the Kemetic system. You can find them in many other traditions and many other civilizations even before the Egyptians. Okay, so they are tested. You're not venturing on your own into something new. It may seem new to you because you haven't heard of them before, or these principles that you haven't seen taught in this particular way with Ma'at, or maybe in the particular way that I'm teaching it through this channel. But this is nothing new. This is not my own. This is what I'm telling you. Those are the Ma'at principle, and they're open for anyone who wants to follow them, no matter your tradition, no matter your race, no matter your culture. If you look at the Ma'at series, no matter what your origin are, you can apply those principles. They're pretty much usable by anyone. So don't look at tradition as something that's oppressive. Look at tradition as a body of work. Any tradition, before you reject even your own tradition, before you reject even your own culture, put on this different lens and look at that culture, your own culture, as a body of work. Look at the food, look at the art, you look at the major figures, the founding fathers if you have some. Look at what your family has, how your family has used some of the tools and principles within your own culture. Then you'll get a better understanding, a broader understanding than being reductive and saying, my culture, I don't have a culture, or my culture doesn't have this, doesn't have that, and thinking that the grass is greener somewhere else. Most of the time it isn't, unless there's something specific for you there. In that case, you may be called to go to a different culture, a different system. But even this different system, it's never all completely pretty. There are also some things that you may like less. That's going to be like that anywhere you go. And that's part of the experiences of us being down here. Let me know what you think about tradition. Do you think tradition is oppressive? Do you think tradition is something that must be changed and that anyone can change the traditions that have been established for years and decades and centuries? Or are you more conservative? Do you think that, there may be aspects of tradition that you don't understand clearly, that nobody have taught you, that it may require you to learn a lot more, to maybe seek the assistance of somebody who's better versed in that particular culture or tradition before you can throw everything away, or even before you can start criticizing something, especially if you don't understand it? Do you also think that you can just wake up one morning and start your own tradition and pull out where are you pulling those things out for you to start your tradition? What are you using in order for you to start a tradition? This is very interesting because when you're saying, I'm going to start my own tradition, I'm sure you're looking and pulling from other tradition in order to do that. It has to come from somewhere. So it's just interesting. Please let me know in the comment section what you think about this. So I hope this was useful. And if you do have other questions about tradition, please let them below. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.